Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome yet again to another episode of Dinner Guide. My name is Chef Andy, your regular host, and today I've got something interesting as always. We're going to be focusing on as many dishes as we've mentioned earlier in the show as well, about a very, very beautiful mix of five dishes from 5 different continents. On this particular episode, I'm going to be taking you nicely down into the beautiful streets of Vietnam, and we're going to be making a very, very simple shrimp Vietnamese dumpling. But before we get there, we're going to start by introducing the ingredients which we'll be working with today, and I'll start from the very front. So we're going to be using some nice, beautiful lemon slices there, 1 piece of egg and some soy sauce. We're also going to have some mint leaves in there, 1 piece of red chili and some peeled ginger root. We also have a puree here that consists of onions, scallions, and shrimp in equal amounts, which has just been pureed together. We're also going to use a bit of some all-purpose flour, just 1 piece of scallion there, a bit of some beautiful water chestnuts, some very, very regular instant noodles, some black peppercorns, some salt, and last but not least, some peanut oil. We're going to take a short break now, but before we do come back, we are going to actually allow you to just grab your pens and papers if you're taking notes for this particular recipe, and we're just going to dive right into it when we come back. So please don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are just tuning in, we're just about to start a very, very simple dish, which is a dish of today, which is a very simple Vietnamese dumpling. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, we are going to be making them as simple as we possibly can, of course, with our own touch to the original recipe. So very, very simply, you're going to actually start off with very simply combining a few of your ingredients to start with. So begin by sifting half a cup of some all-purpose flour and discard whatever remains in your sieve. Next up, you will proceed to add a bit of some egg white. So very important, proceed by firstly separating your egg, and that is very, very easy to achieve. So all you're going to need is 1 egg. Just proceed by cracking the shell, and just over a small bowl, proceed to just lift 1/2 of your egg, allowing your egg albumen to just pour out really slowly. And just using the other piece of shell, just secure your yolk and just turn it over, allowing only the yolk to slide over and allowing the excess amount of egg white to just pour over into your bowl. And you can just proceed to separate your eggs. Now, reserve your egg yolk for later. You could actually use that for a few other reasons. But for this particular recipe, we are going to be only working with some egg white. So to that, you will add just a small pinch of some grounded black peppercorn. Add also the egg white of 1 whole egg. And then proceed now to add your shrimp puree. And as I mentioned, we only threw the mixture into a food processor or a blender, so just please do the same thing. And if you don't actually have a blender to use, you can actually chop them very, very finely with your knife, and you should actually be able to get it into a nice minced mixture. So next off, you'll just grab a wooden spoon or any spoon of your choice. You can also work by hand. And all you're going to do is proceed to mix everything together. Simple as that. Be sure also to scrape off what's on the sides of your bowl. Always remember not to waste any of your mixture, especially mixture that may be on the side. So you should actually be getting a nice beautiful aroma from that shrimp on the onion mixture. But then again, we are going to be incorporating a few other ingredients. So I'll start off by adding about half of my soy sauce. So that's about a tablespoon. And also proceed to grate some of your fresh ginger root, using of course your smallest attachment possible to achieve of course the very smallest sizes of the grated ginger. So you should actually be looking at anywhere between a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half. Use your knife as well to scrape off some of that ginger at the back of your attachment for your grater, and discard, and proceed to add your ginger to your mixture. And to that we'll also be incorporating some chestnuts. So these are just some conveniently bought chestnuts. These have been soaking in some liquid, and these are particularly very, very easy to find in your regular retail outlets. So for those, proceed to chop them really finely. And proceed to do so until you get to the very last piece. And for those of you who might actually have an issue or a problem getting your hands on some chestnuts, you can actually avoid it for the recipe, for this particular recipe, if you can be able to find it. And you can actually alternate that with anything from button mushrooms or shiitake mushrooms. It will still give you a very beautiful nuttiness. So just proceed to chop your chestnuts as finely as you possibly can, and of course reconstituting it to the center of your board. Just proceed to chop finely as you would for coriander or parsley. Okay, so once those are chopped, just constitute them back together on your board and lift those into your bowl. Discard some of that root, and then also proceed to add a bit of some fresh mint. So I'm just going to pull a few leaves from this stalk of mint. About 4 or 5 large pieces should do. And all you need to do now is just lay one leaf right over the other. Just like that, simple as that. And all you're going to do now is just try and roll that together, making sure the leaves are nicely rolled and very tightly pressed to each other. And just proceed to chiffonade that, and chiffonade just being cutting it into some very, very thin strips. Once done, proceed to add that to your chestnut mixture. And last but not least, squeeze a bit of your lemon juice right over your mixture. Lemon really helps in just incorporating your flavors together, and it's a very, very good addition, especially if you're working with fish. Now to finish that off, add a bit of salt for seasoning and a small bit of some ground black peppercorns, and just proceed to mix everything together. Right, once concluded, Allow your mixture to just rest slightly on the side for just a few minutes. And while that continues, we're actually just going to bring our attention back to the pots on the side here. So I've got 2 pots of just plain water on the go. And this we're going to be using to cook our dumplings in, and as well we're just going to blanch our noodles in. So I'm actually going to start with the first one, which is the noodles. Remember, this cook really quick. So very important to actually be very fast when making this. So I'm just going to allow the water to come to the boil and just slide our piece of noodles in there. And all you need to do now is, using a spoon, just proceed to just move that around the water, around the base of the pan. Of course, turning it over a few times, allowing you to just manage to separate those 2 sheets of noodles that are inside your packet. And basically, within a minute, you should actually be able to start to see your noodle just separate in the pan. Just give that a quick mixture and turn down your heat completely, and just allow that to cook for anywhere between a minute to a minute and a half. But while those continue, I'm just going to direct your attention to the board here, and all we're going to do now is we're going to proceed to portion out our dumplings. So very simple. I like to particularly use an ice cream scoop. So I'm just going to pull that small attachment out. And very importantly, also always have a nice bowl with some cold water inside. This should actually make it a little more easier to get some beautiful scoops from your mixture. All we are going to do now is turn our board around and proceed to just dust the surface where we'll be resting our scoops. And it's as simple as that. But before we get into that, remember, very important to actually take your noodles out of the water at this stage. Remember, it might actually be very difficult to do so once your hands are tied up doing your dumplings. And if you actually have someone around that can actually be able to help you, it also comes very handy. So our noodles are now nicely blanched. So I'm just going to just lightly lift those from the pot of water. Of course, just allowing them to drain as much liquid as we can possibly allow them to. And then all you do is rest those in a bowl. And then just proceed to remove all the noodles from the water. And of course, always bearing in mind to leave out the water. Right, so once you've got your noodles all removed from the pan, and onto your bowl, just sprinkle just a bit of that water using your spoon, mix them together in the bowl, and basically all you need to do now is cover them really quickly and allow them to just sit for a few minutes before you proceed to plate. So we're just going to proceed to cover that with some cling film. And of course, also very important to always remember, if you're going to cover something that's that's still very hot with some cling film, always very handy to just use a sharp knife to leave a little hole right in the middle of your bowl, which will actually allow for most of the steam to escape, and it will actually allow for your ingredients inside to not be very soggy. So this we're just gonna rest on the side here, and we will come to it a little later. And now on to the next part of the cooking stage, which is basically doing the dumplings. So as you can see, we've got some water already boiling over here. So it's already up to the boil. To that I will add just a bit of salt. And all we're going to do now is proceed to scoop out some of the dumplings that I'd mentioned earlier. So very simply, just begin by dusting your hands, dusting the palm of your hands, and using your ice cream scoop, proceed to scoop those out. Of course, resting them slightly on the palm of your hand. And just proceed to dust lightly around. And that should actually allow you to be able to just roll that nice little piece of dumpling over your board. And all you need to do is just keep dusting your fingertips, and use your hands to just reconstitute your dumplings. Simple as that. And once you've got your first piece ready, just proceed to grab a clean plate and very gently proceed to move your dumpling onto the plate. And remember, this will now go into your refrigerator, and we will actually give it quite a few minutes to just reconstitute and manage to actually allow them to cool off, which will actually allow us to really cook them very easily. But before we do so, we are going to take a short commercial break, and I am actually going to proceed to finish scooping out some of this, but we will not actually cook them at this stage. We will take the break, and when we come back, we'll just clear up our station here, and I'll take you through the last and final process of preparing your dumplings. So please don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Before we took a short break, we're now back, and for those of you who missed out on what we were doing before, we were definitely just finishing off a very beautiful dish. Remember, we were doing some Vietnamese dumplings, our style, but now we're just about to finish them off. So very simply, as I'd mentioned, very important to have some boiling water before you proceed to add your dumplings in. All you need to do now is just slide those down lightly with your piece of tongs. Toss them around just a little bit to make sure they're fully submerged in the water. All you need to do is allow those to cook and steam for anywhere between 6 to 9 minutes. But I do have some that we had actually done before here, so this is basically the same mixture. Only difference is this ones were actually fried, and this we were basically doing just to give you a synopsis of what you can actually be able to do with the same mixture. So for those of you who may not be looking at doing it in the very healthy way, which is a steaming way, you can actually fry it, and it will actually work really well as an aperitif or even as a starter for your dinner course. So we're going to just go right ahead and start plating. And as you can see, I've got a nice bowl there with a bit of some soy sauce. Very common alternative for dipping. And all we're going to do now is just move our fried dumplings onto the plate, like so. And now just to finish off, to plate the other different technique that we were actually doing initially, very simply, begin by grabbing your noodles and just place them nicely to one side of your plate like that. So we're just going to go with about a half portion of noodles for this recipe. So simple as that. All you need to do now is add some of your very small nitty-gritties, which is basically just a bit of garnish and some few condiments just for color. So very simply begin by deseeding one of your slices of chili. So about half a piece of chili will do for this recipe. And just proceed to julienne that nice and finely. Next up, we're just going to grab a nice beautiful piece of lemon there, which you just basically squeeze onto your dumpling, and you just set that on the side. We will also just garnish with a small sprig of mint on one side of the plate like that. And just to finish those off, a bit of chilies right over your noodles, and maybe 2-3 pieces also inside your dipping sauce, just for a bit of color as well. And all you're left to do now is to just complete your dish by just adding to it your steamed dumplings, and these are now ready. So we're just going to turn the water off completely, and using a slotted spoon, just proceed to grab some 2 napkins there and proceed to just lift your dumplings from the water and just rest them with a spoon underneath. I'm actually using a slotted spoon, so this actually has a bit of room underneath there to allow the excess liquid to just pour through. Tilt them like that slightly over your plate. All you need to do now is add your steamed dumplings onto your plate. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is as easy as it is to make a very, very simple Vietnamese dumpling. So as I mentioned earlier, the ones to my right are particularly the ones we were going to show you, but I have actually also included a separate portion on the side which were easily just fried instead of steaming, just to give you an idea of how best to play with the recipe 2 ways. So I will thank you once again for tuning in, and for those of you who've also been tuning in through Facebook, if you've been actually watching us live, thank you so much for tuning in. I will remind you to actually send us your feedback by leaving your comments, your inquiries, or any questions pertaining the show, because we definitely always look forward to hearing back from you. So from the studio and myself, I will bid you farewell and wish you a lovely evening. And until the next episode, enjoy your dinner tonight, have a lovely evening, and see you soon. Bye-bye.